Yo, 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 welcome back to the Further Your Lifestyle podcast, conversations on lifestyle, passions, and hustles. My name's Chris Furlong, I'm your host, and I'm once again super thrilled to introduce you to this week's guest. And it's not a new guest, it is actually Justin Nolan. He's returning for another two-part episode, actually. And if you haven't seen the first episode with Justin, I had it a few months back. Go check it out. It is well worth the listen. But Justin is a great guy. He's one of the OGs that has enabled me to actually make this podcast happen. And it's just more than fitting to have him come back and actually talk about a huge passionate area of his own, and of course my own as well, and that is a 9-step process on how to live your big dream. Now, in this two-part series, we go through part 1 and part 2. Part 1 being around clarity, which is the first 1 to 4 steps, and then the second part being about completion, which is step 5 to step 9. So we're going to focus on step 1 to 4 today. We're going to jump into that very shortly. I appreciate you being here. If you are new here, we do have the YouTube experience. We're on Spotify, we're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, all those great places. So however you like to listen, get comfortable, get cozy, cup of tea, cup of coffee. However, if you are driving, obviously just listen, don't watch. And let's jump into it. Welcome, Justin, to the Further Your Lifestyle podcast again. This is number 2 episode for you, and I appreciate you coming back for a second round. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. Thank you for having me. I feel like we could do 102 of these, but grateful just to be doing number 2 right now. And I have my Further Your Lifestyle pin. I was going to wear it, but I'll find it and take a picture of it at least.
Oh, good, mate. Oh, good. No, I appreciate you coming back. And it's actually kind of weird because I haven't really done any repeat episodes before with a guest. And, you know, there's some people that I've reached out to, and that's going to be coming, and more people will be seeing that. So you're the first off the cuff, mate. So no pressure.
I appreciate it. I always feel that when you have good conversations, you could have, we could have gone on for 3 hours like Joe Rogan, but we stopped it at the hour and, come back 3 times. Why not?
That's it. There's always so many things. I know that we've chatted so many times, but for the audience, what we're here to talk about today is actually a little something that Justin's actually put together, and we're going to go through in detail. But I guess, well, I don't want to sell it, but it's how do I get to live my big dream? And it's basically 9 steps that you've put together, and you've probably spent a lot of time over the years in formulating it, putting it together, or maybe there was no, special formula to it. It's kind of just come through experience. And I actually, if anyone wants to go check it out, if you jump over to his Instagram, there's a bit of a reference of him putting it down on paper and then spilling coffee all over it at the same time. So it's just goes to show that, you don't come up with these ideas, these processes, or, have those epiphanies. You can't plan for them, right? They do come in those spare of the moments and come when you're likely to spill coffee. So I just think it's really beautiful in that sense, because it's just real.
That's bringing back memories for sure, because I think I have posted that at least twice. It's one of those classic posts where, you're going to recycle content not too often. But the first time I posted that was probably right when I first got Instagram. Who knows? It may have even been only on Twitter, but it was a few years ago. And then I reposted it recently because, it's one of those memories that really sticks out. I remember that day like it was yesterday. It was also right before all of this pandemic stuff, where you remember just going to the coffee shop to work, if even for half an hour. And that's so foreign to me now. So
yeah, I think it's foreign for a lot of us. It's a weird vibe. I mean, even going in to get takeaway coffee is a bit of a weird vibe, because you're kind of like looking around, or you're seeing other people. And anyway, let's not spend too much time on that one. So last time I had you on, we talked about chasing big dreams, and we talked about, how can people, embrace those big dreams and make it happen. And I think this is a great segue or a follow-up session about that, because I mean, you're all about big dreams. And if anyone hasn't seen episode 1 with Justin, go check it out, and all the obviously links and details are in the show notes. But you're all about helping people, maybe not necessarily making them get to their big dreams, but helping them see how they can get to their big dreams. Because a lot of the time, people talk about getting to big dreams, or this is what you need to do to get to a big dream. But you can say anything you want, but unless the person's going to put something into action, it's not going to happen. And I think you coming up with a 9-step process, which is what we're going to go through today, I think it's important to understand for anyone listening that this doesn't guarantee that you're going to get what you want, because you have to actually go do the work, right? You can read it. It's not just going to happen overnight. So I think it's always important to help people understand that, Justin's obviously put this together through time, effort, and that's probably the first thing I want to understand from you is how did you put this together? And it's not happened overnight. It's happened over a journey. So let's talk about that. When we talk about a 9-step process of achieving big dreams, what is that and where did it come from, man?
Sure, yeah. Nothing like starting off with a huge question. This is why we get to hour-long episodes very quickly. But to keep it somewhat concise, I guess, yes, it's been very many iterations, journals and notebooks, sketching, just thinking of little ideas, the iPhone, or then when I switched to Android, just the Notes app, just like leaving little notes here and there as I tried to construct sort of the step-by-step process that I think everyone goes through if they achieve their big dream in life.
Yeah. Okay.
The genesis of all of this for me is kind of twofold. One being my big passion and that sort of why that we reference, know your why, start with why,
Hmm.
is simply put to support youth mental health. We talk
Yeah.
about the youth mental health crisis. Very quickly for me, it extends to adults just the same. But I struggled with mental health a lot as a teen. And now I work with a lot of teens that struggle with mental health. So I can very quickly have that close to my heart, my purpose, and it will forever be my purpose, no matter I'm making YouTube channels, podcasts like this, or creating a post for Instagram. So that's what's nice, that it underlies all of this. But what I was realizing was in helping people try and achieve these big dreams, it was way too esoteric and it was very, very difficult to make it in any way pragmatic. Like it seemed almost like someone got lucky, right?
Yeah.
Billie Eilish's music, she just got lucky because she's super talented. It's
Yeah.
like, well, no, there were steps there. And somebody who side hustles, in their mid 40s or 50s and then figures out that career that they longed for before, maybe to bake cakes or something, and all of a sudden they're succeeding in this business and they're like, why didn't I start sooner?
Yeah.
Well, beyond why didn't you start sooner, why did that person figure it out when somebody else doesn't? They go back to the cubicle and the commute every day and they
That's
grind it
right.
out and they don't know where to begin. So for years I was tinkering with what became these 9 steps, which to think of the idea of 9 seems like a lot. But the way that I looked at it was like, if I was writing a very meaty book on this topic, that really went in detail to help people, like, look, you want your big dream. It's not just a bumper sticker on your car. It's something you can achieve. And here are the 9 steps to doing it. So that's kind of how it came about.
Yeah. Okay. It's and look, that's what I was expecting. It's not something that you can just whip up overnight, right? And I think a lot of the time, and you've kind of answered it already with saying how people have gone out and it's taken them 40 years to actually get that idea, and it's all just come together, right? It's not something that can just happen overnight. Like if I tell people, how am I going to make $1 million, and what's your plan to get to it? It's not like they can just say, well, here's my 9-step process of becoming a millionaire, because, well, they haven't achieved it. They can't go back and, so it's not until they've achieved it that they can go back and say, well, the first thing I did was, I need to have a plan, or I need to understand my why. And then you can break down the different points or the different parts to the puzzle in getting there. And I think that's with anything, it really comes back to hindsight, right? Because, oh, well, if I'd known these 9 steps when I started, it would have made that journey to whatever it is so much easier, but not necessarily easy. And I think that's something you can probably appreciate as well, because you're always learning, always on something, on a new path to pursuing something, and it's not like you have all the answers, right? So before we get into it, I guess one thing I wanted to clarify. So I guess for you, with this 9-step process, have you, I guess, how do I say this? It's kind of like, have you actually been able to say that, well, I've done it for 5 or 3 or 2 different things, or is it something which you would probably actually say that it needs to continue to adapt, or it's not just like, yeah, you follow these 9 steps and it's going to happen?
Yeah, so I'm sure we'll kind of go through each in detail and have side topics going on, but to jump just to step 9, I created that as, just keep learning, or keep going, or keep
Yeah.
learning, or the idea of like end game growth mindset, right? It
Yeah.
never ends. Like,
Yeah.
I don't care how much longevity increases for human beings with all the research we have and stuff and technology these days, we still are not living for
Yeah.
thousands of years or anything. So within that finite period we have, you can learn until you can't learn anymore. And
Yeah.
so I think that's okay, right? And depending on what the passion is or what the big dream is, maybe that's going to drive things in terms of if you continue to learn one thing over another, right? The idea behind this, though, was if you pick something, then you end up going through these 9 steps. So
Yeah.
just to relate it to my own life, I've certainly done this in the field of formal education,
Okay.
right? Becoming an educator and going through that whole process. Certainly coaching, whether it's life coaching or athletic coaching. I've done it for myself when it comes to fitness and being an athlete as a football player. I would say I've probably done it as being a dad to an extent, um, and whatever else. But within each of those parts of my life, right, I feel like I've gone through these steps. Um, when it comes to social media content, some creators have a lot of structure to what they do.
Yeah.
And then some have way less. You look at like a Gary Vee, people learn so many things from that human being, but it's not like he has always structured, right? It's just these
Yeah.
random
True.
TikTok videos or these random stories or these random clips of inspiration, which is why the camera angles and the microphone don't matter that
Yeah.
much, because it's content
Yeah.
knowledge based, inspiration based. Or you see that some people have very formalized podcasts or episodics. So for me, it was hard for a very long time to figure out, well, what is my message, right? I know it's growth mindset. I know these are the steps to follow your big dreams, but how can I share that? So what I've done with my content is I've decided to go through these 9 steps in a given topic for a period of time.
Okay.
And then I can switch that again later. The reason for doing that is just to model this, right? It's
Yeah.
easy to jot it on paper or to write a book about it, but I felt that that's very much what was lacking from a lot of the books out there on, if you go to a bookstore, you can find a ton that say, own your big dream or
Yeah.
chase your big dreams or this is the path to success, etc. And then you look at that person and they've succeeded in being an author and selling that book, but they
Yeah.
haven't gone to do it in too many other things.
Yeah. And I think that's why I wanted to clarify it with you, because I think one of the cliches is, we hear all the success stories. And I think Gary Vee probably represents it the best is, you hear so many people of, oh, I'm now worth 10 million or whatever it is, right? And they've gone through this journey and it's been 10 years of hard work, right? And that's true. We get that. But like, what did you do? How did you do it? What were the steps or what were the things? And I think the way you talked about how Gary Vee puts his content together is he pulls it from 5 years ago, 10 years ago, or 6 years ago, 2 years ago, or last week, puts it all together, and it's the same messages blended together across multiple years, and showing what he did when and why he said it and how that now is relevant to where he is today. And I think that helps people put things into perspective. But for you also saying that you've been able to put some level of practicability around it, or some physical, you've actually gone in and done it numerous times in different areas, and how it probably does pivot or adjust slightly depending if you're doing it as a dad or as an educator. But there's the steps there that has enabled you to then progress forwards, and I think that helps people digest it a lot easier, rather than just saying do this, do this, do this, because it's like, well, what do I do? It's helping have that contrast helps set the scene. So let's dive into it, Run. And I mean, step number one, and you can go through and how you want to explain it, because I know there is a bit of a diagram, and if anyone's watching the video version of this, I will put this up on screen so people can see. Otherwise, it will be in the show notes for anyone to jump over and have a look on the on Instagram, on Justin's Instagram. But step one, it says dream, wonder, and think. But I know that's part of a breakdown of, I think you've got 2 subsections of this. So let's dive into it.
Sure. So in terms of the overarching 9 things, the first 4 are really about gaining clarity, right?
Okay.
And then the last 5 in this model about completing on that clarity, executing on that plan, right? So in the first 4 steps, that idea of dreaming, I mean, that's where it all starts. It's really so much fun. But what's fascinating to me is that so many people cannot do it at all. Like every time I do a podcast on this topic or anything like this, I have accumulated probably 10 more examples in a matter of a week of people who have told me that they can't dream big, or that they don't have big dreams, right? Or insert comment here, some form of, I don't have a big dream and it's okay. Well, maybe that's the case, but at some point I'm willing to bet you did, and things started to get covered up. And so the term that I've chosen to kind of latch onto when it comes to that is this idea of dream blockers, right?
Okay.
Things getting in the way. And so certainly that is one of those first steps in that stage, is realizing that you can dig a little bit. It's going to be painful. We'll probably cry as we do it, but you're going to discover that you have some underlying dreams. And once you start brainstorming, it can be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Scary, because you have to be vulnerable and start pushing yourself a bit. And so there are all different little like tidbits of things that would be important in each of these steps. And in this first one, I think it's really digging a bit to understand, why are you blocking your dreams? Why are you thinking small? And one really tangible thing that I would say that's important in this stage is to make sure that you have a caring person in your life that's going to support you to
Yeah.
exploring this. So it could be formal, like a counselor, a therapist. It could be just a friend. It could be your husband, your wife, your life partner. But and oftentimes that's not the best person. There is a
Yeah.
best person or a best group of people for you who love you, support you unconditionally, and want to see you succeed. And I think that in step one, that's when you need to be able to access that person as well. So maybe we can, if you have follow-up questions with each
Yeah.
step, we can kind of go through them a little bit.
Yeah, because I mean, the first thing when I think about this, right, reflecting on my my own journey is, and talking to other people, is usually when I look at other people or when I think of myself, is there's potential or an idea. So whether it's my idea or I see someone else has an idea and it has such great potential, just because I can see how they can take this and run with it. Actually putting that into practice, or I guess fathoming it, that can be quite overwhelming, right? And I think you've kind of mentioned it already, but digging down a bit. So when it comes down to individuals, if we're seeking that, oh, I want to go out and create something, and I want to, whatever it is, whether it's to do with running or for me reselling, I had this dream and I already had some level of understanding of how I can execute it. So it makes it a little bit easier because, I don't have to necessarily wonder and think. I've kind of already done that. It's now about putting it into execution and then going through more steps. But for someone that maybe they don't realize they have an opportunity in front of them because it's just always what they've done. Like maybe they're good at drawing or artwork, right? They've just done it as a thing, as kind of, just to clear their head or their free time. But someone like me comes along and says, oh, wow, you've got something so exciting here. It can blossom into something so big. That can be quite overwhelming. And then to try and help them realize, well, how can they take this further rather than just being an escape? Do you have some ideas around that? Because I think sometimes whether maybe it's not good enough, or, it can be imposter syndrome, or they don't want that pressure to be able to make something, bigger and better, even though it is already really, really good. They just can't necessarily see that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. And so one word that I like to use when it comes to this idea of big dream is big passion. Like I think that can kind of be
Yeah.
interchangeable. And so a lot of times when we enter this conversation that we're having right now, people will say things to the effect of, well, yeah, but just because they're good at drawing doesn't mean they have to try and monetize that.
Well,
And
that's
I
true.
100%
That's
agree.
a good
It
point.
doesn't mean they need to succeed in any way, shape, or form. NFTs, t-shirts, posters, selling their artwork, commissions, being in a museum, or building a reputation as an artist, they can use it simply as 100% hobby.
Yeah.
And I think this is a really valuable time to point out two important things. And one is that there's this continuum when it comes to our dreams or our
Yeah.
passions, about how much is it done for an audience,
Yeah.
or to sell, or to monetize, like with a purpose for serving others, and how much of it is just to serve ourselves. And I think that continuum continually changes, right? And that's okay.
Yes.
So we could put it into percentages of, it's right now 50% hobby and 50% job is the goal, or it's 100% hobby, or 90% hobby and 10%. And for those to slide around and evolve as you evolve as an artist with your confidence, and to evolve the other way, right? I was listening to Logic speak the other day about hip hop, and somebody was asking him all these hip hop questions, and he's like, I don't want to answer hip hop questions anymore. I'm done with the culture of hip hop. I want to listen to like classic rock and stuff now. And that's okay too. I think to go back the other way, where I used to be obsessed with hip hop because that was my world I was
Yeah.
living and everything was hip hop. And how do I, make my money on my next album? And what can I learn from this artist so that my audience will appreciate the same types of things and blah, 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 blah. Well, now I'm done with that for now. I'm going to scale back and music becomes hobby again.
Yeah.
And so I think that ebb and flow is really good. And it's important to point out. The second thing is that with all of these things, there's always like a DNA genetic based answer. And what I mean by that is there's one answer for all these questions and it scales to the individual, which I think is
Yeah.
the hardest thing about all this, but the most beautiful as well, right? People say the idea of helping people or being a life coach is not niche enough. And I completely feel the opposite way, where someone
Yeah.
like Tony Robbins is able to be and provide the most niche service in the world because there's only one way he's going to approach helping someone, and it's whatever they need.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think you've really hit the nail on the head here, is because and I loved how you said before, as you go through this process of, dreaming, wondering and thinking, digging a little deeper, it can be quite, you have to go through this vulnerability stage, or there might be tears, only because, how I said that, maybe someone has something in front of them that they're really good at. That doesn't actually mean that that's the thing they should be pursuing, because they might be actually just doing that as an escape and, procrastinating or putting something else aside that, potentially they realize that that's actually the thing they're passionate about and that they actually want to explore, but they avoid it. And usually that's the harder thing to do, is to actually realize, no, I actually want to go into that, but diving into it can be too scary to do. It means they're going to have to rip something off, or they're going to have to, come out of their shell or get uncomfortable before they can actually step into that dream and, I guess, walk the steps or walk the path. Because a lot of the time, we have these ideas and we're expecting something to just happen, like for it to occur. But you have to go through a journey. You have to go through this growth process of actually starting to make that tangible, whether that means reaching out. And for me, starting a podcast, it meant I had to reach out to people. I had to open up and be vulnerable and maybe get rejected, right? And that means it's not easy. It means I have to face those kind of things. But sometimes that can be a bit scary to even think about, oh well, that's going to be too hard, so I'm just going to go back to the easier thing or ignore it.
Well, for sure. And someone asked me recently what the number one thing, if I could only pick one thing. I think it was a tweet, probably one of those tweet questions, right? If you could pick one thing to teach in high school in today's day and age, what would that one thing be? And I said becoming comfortable with rejection, because again, whether it's creating music and putting it out into the world and it getting 0 streams, or it's trying to sell the hoodies you designed, or to start a business selling digital marketing services, or it doesn't matter. The fun thing about all this is it's somewhat interchangeable, but that getting over that rejection as just part of the process, right? The idea that Michael Jordan classic quotes, or Wayne Gretzky classic quotes, or any of the baseball ones about home run hitters hit 1 in every 20, and that's pretty good, but they swing at every at bat, and all these kind of cliches really plays into this stuff for sure. When first coming up with these things and kind of, again, really starting the process of putting pen to paper, I knew that there were other elements, right? There's always a personal journey, and it's much like helping someone with addictions. They need to want to do it. They need to be asking for help, and they need to be putting in their own steps on that journey. But the other part that was missing was the ability to give them sort of a playbook or a guidebook for how to do that as well. And so that's what this fulfills. It doesn't really fulfill the other part, short of some of the steps involved, making sure you network, making sure that you have a mentor and a mentee and someone equal to you, and all these different things that come into it, which could serendipitously end up helping that journey as well. Because when you're, for example, surrounding yourself with people who are also pursuing big dreams, you more often are feeling like you want to do it as well.
Well, that's a very good point, right? So it's, what's that saying that, you are the 5 people that you surround yourself around, whether they're negative, whether it's positive, or whatever they're into, that's what's going to influence you. And you're a piece of each of those 5, or however many people it is. And I think that's a very important point. So with the whole dream thing, then, for someone that has no idea what their dream is, this isn't going to necessarily get their dream. Step one is probably actually the hard part, because if you don't already have an idea, you actually have to do a lot of, I guess a lot of homework. But to help people put into perspective, then, so to actually, I guess, identify that step one, or the dream is ready to then move to step two, what would be kind of like the output, or the end result that you would define at the end of step one to say that you're ready to move on to the next thing?
It depends on how strong those dream blockers are for any given individual. I've certainly met people where, like, there's zero chance. They almost don't even want to talk at all about anything in the world, let alone their own dreams and passions. And someone struggling with severe depression or anxiety to the point where it's where they're hospitalized and this kind of thing.
Right.
Versus someone who talks openly about, well, yeah, I wanted to be a hockey player, but then I just, life passed me by, and I gave up on it, and I always wanted to start this business, and I'm really good at guitar, and I've written 1,000 songs, but I've never published any of them. Like, there are people that talk openly about them. So I think, again, it becomes individualized. However, the main identification thing, even if, to go back to the person who can't talk about it at all, is that they do get to the point where they're willing to entertain a conversation about what their strengths and interests may be, and are willing to talk about, at least, or provide one example of, like, well, yeah, when I was 6, I played in a basketball league, or I played volleyball, and I do really remember enjoying that. Like, maybe I could do something in sports, or, like, once they're willing to entertain a conversation, I think it's very easy to go to that sort of step 2 and 3, which is identifying strengths and interests. And this diagram, it was meant to be an Instagram type post, so it's simplified, but I referenced that it's basically could be a whole book, or each of these topics could be a book. So when I look at the idea, and that's why I chunked clarity all together, because oftentimes you'll see, you get into this conversation about dreams, you start uncovering some dream blockers, you could maybe do some fun exercises to start dreaming big again, you discuss strengths and interests. When you're coming into this step 4 of picking the one thing, oftentimes you're now able to go back and discuss, sort of like, one of my favorite exercises, and it's just crazy, so sometimes you do a scaled down version of it, but I learned it from Steve Harvey. And it's to try and brainstorm, if in 10 years from now, your life was picture perfect, was completely, like, scripted, including all of the possibilities you could imagine under the sun, what 300 dreams, 300 dreams
300
would have come true in the next 10 years.
And
the point being, you just are completely breaking down that need to over evaluate, or the writer's block, or the dreamer's block, because there's no way to get to 300 unless you're just getting super creative, super design thinking, whiteboard or pen and paper, and just rattling off as much as possible.
And there's 2 takeaways from that, just on the Steve Harvey one, around that 300 ideas or dreams, or whatever. It's kind of like, I think sometimes maybe people evaluate dreams as something that is big, like a dream has to be big. But when you start putting down 300 things on paper, not saying it comes like a bit of a bucket list, but in some sense it's almost like, well, I want to in the next 10 years I wanted to have written a book, I wanted to had achieved this, or gone skydiving, or sold something online, or whatever it may be. And all those little things, they're all little, I guess, things that help you lead to a bigger picture, which is that dream lifestyle, maybe. And so maybe we're actually doing ourselves a bit too much hard work and thinking, wow, this dream has to be, I have to be this, have to be that, I have to be, this person that, people will know me when I walk down the street. Well, that's not really what we're trying to say here. The dream is, it's actually anything. It could be, maybe you just want to go skydiving, and that might be a matter of getting over the fear of getting up onto the plane, or maybe you want to be a certified skydiver, maybe that's a better way to put it, and going for that. That's not going to happen overnight either, right? You have to realize, well, what are your strengths, what are are your interests around that? Okay, I don't like planes, so if that's not your interest, but you have this dream to be a certified skydiving instructor, then there's obviously going to be some stuff you're going to have to work through and journey through to get there. So, and then the other point I wanted to bring up is, you're right, step 1 isn't kind of like step 1 then move on to step 2 and 3. It's kind of like step 1, 2, 3, and we're going to get to 4. But step 1, 2, and 3, they're kind of like you're going to be going back around and around, like, jumping in. So for those, if you didn't catch it, step 1 being dream, step 2 being strengths, and step 3 being interest. Well, a lot of the strengths and interests are going to help you identify, well, what is that dream, or what is that thing that you're curious about, or that thing that makes you think, or wants you to move forward, right? And then you're going to play it against those. So maybe let's dive into that a bit then. Is if you've just done step 1, but going through that strengths process, right? Are we literally weighing up, well, what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses, to help then give you a bit more clarity, or is it a different process?
Oh, exactly that. What are you good at?
Yeah.
And as I say that, I'm thinking of so many people that I've worked with them and asked that question, and they, similar to dreaming, just say nothing, or they don't feel like they're good at anything. And as sad as that is, it's just the reality, right? For so many, even if they are like really good at something, it does not map to any skill necessarily. I've learned that, right? Because you could find someone it's very easy to find someone who's a very talented musician or artist or a business person who says that they suck at it, and they're not kidding. It's just that's their perception, right? See it all the time in the fitness world, right? People who struggle with body image and things like that, males trying to have muscles, or females trying to be thin, or to not be gender biased. It happens the opposite as well. But this difference in perception to what your strengths are versus what other people think. Now, the opposite is true. Some people are overconfident. And so I think that it's important that we look at, well, what do you feel your strengths are? Let's try and get some of those down. Another really good exercise at this point, again, just practicing that vulnerability, is to reach out to other people to ask them what your strengths are. And I've done that with classrooms of 30 kids before, right? Where we do it confidentially, but the 29 other kids are writing down a strength about that one kid. You do that sort of exercise, and all of a sudden you could do that. You could reach out to your email list, or make a social post, or just DM some people that well, or you could call couple friends up. Either way, you put yourself in that vulnerable position and say, look, I've listed some things that I think I'm good at. Could you tell me what you think would be strengths of mine? And that's a really, really valuable, difficult, but valuable exercise. And we're just putting down an example of some of the things that you are good at. Now, the reason being, it's kind of threefold. One, build confidence as a byproduct. Two, it may indicate something that we want to pursue after we look at interests and pick something. Or it may also show us an example of something we could use and leverage to help us pursue the real passion that we want to pursue. And that's where you get in the side hustle conversation, right? Well, I'm really good at video editing. Okay, well, what's your passion? I want to be a musician. It's like, all right, well, let's start a freelance business with video editing, because now you may be able to free up some time to work on your music.
Okay. And I think that's really good. I mean, it's all starting to play back, being vulnerable. Yeah, you're right. Going out and asking people, what do you think my strong points are, or whatnot. That's not an easy thing to do. And it's a bit scary, because some people are going to be full on, or they might go the reverse and say, oh, well, you're not good at this, which, helps gives that clarity, right? I just wanted to actually clarify then. So would you be asking for people to help you identify weaknesses, or is it strictly trying to focus on the strengths?
I mean, if it were me, I'd be completely open to asking about weaknesses. I think it certainly depends. I don't want to just answer that for every single question. That it depends on the person. However, I do feel that this early on, especially for somebody, and this is probably the majority, is that they aren't like you, where they know that they want to pursue that running. They know they want to pursue the flipping business, like you referenced earlier. Typically, when I'm answering this, I'm more referencing people who are struggling. And so I really think that focusing on strength at that point is definitely the priority.
Plus it helps give that confidence as well, and helps you narrow down. Okay. All right. So this is good. I'm liking this. So we're speaking about you dreaming, getting into that mindset, helping you understand what's blocking things. Then the strengths, you're starting to identify, okay, I'm good at this. You mentioned, maybe it's video editing or musician or whatever. So then step 3 being interests, that starts to actually put those interests into play or reachable objects, because if people do say, oh, you're good at video editing, well, then that might be, oh, is that actually an interest of mine, versus, oh, well, actually I hate doing it. Just because I'm good at it doesn't mean that I like it either. So is that really how we then flow into step 3 of interest, is like starting to put those pieces together and seeing, well, what's actually something that could stick to a wall?
Yeah, and to me, this stage is really, they're all fun, and when we're working with humans supporting each other, it's all fun.
Yeah.
But this stage is a lot of fun, going from stage 3 to stage 4, where you're starting to be able to think outside the box a bit and come up with all of these ideas for things that you
Yep.
are really interested in. And as long as you've put in the work to be able to really start dreaming big, then stage 3 is a lot of fun, because you start listing all of these things, like being a script writer, that you
Yep.
haven't really thought about for 10 years, but
Yep.
it's coming back up. I wanted to write the book, and we could go on and on,
Yep.
excuse me, with examples. But I think that if you've not put in the work in step 1, then stage 3 really still
Yeah.
is pretty difficult and challenging. So it's not necessarily the same timeline for people. I think this is another important thing to point out, as I referenced Billie Eilish earlier in music. So she went through these 9 steps and succeeded by the time she was 15 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
That exact same amount of success could take somebody else 30 years, and that's okay. But the steps are pretty much the same, and that's what's interesting.
Yeah.
So when it comes to interests, yeah, just listing down all of those things that are interests that you may want to pursue. And then what we do is we look back at strengths and interests, and we say, okay, are we going to combine 2 of these?
Yep.
If one of your strengths was interviewing people because you did that as a journalist, but you really have an interest in building a social media brand, maybe we land on this concept of doing podcasting.
Yep.
The other thing is, you've succeeded in your investments and the stocks that you're in. So when we go down and we start listing interests, all of a sudden it's to be a spoken word poet, which has nothing to do with anything you've ever done. But we're like, all right, well, look, we've got the capital to the burn rate to play with this for 2 or 3 years. You're going to succeed. So let's do it. And then now we're going into picking that one thing and pursuing the completion or the execution steps on that spoken word poetry, because we have the capital. So it just depends, again, on the person and what they're going through. It could be that we're combining strengths and interests to pursue. It could be that we end up going with really one of our strengths, because we agree that we do like doing that thing. And the last thing I'll say too, when it comes to all of this, the idea of getting towards the final stages of clarity, is that I think a really good life coach or someone supporting people recognizes that a lot of times the answers are right there within, and there are little things that had to evolve or change. I had a client recently that I was working with who really wanted to get out of their current job. But after talking for a very short period of time, they realized that all they had to do was switch the mindset within that job. So for now, they really feel confident and comfortable with pursuing that 9 to 5 with a different lens. And that's okay too. So, but it comes down to, let's start throwing out some interests. And again, it's so fun, because like I've had people say, oh, well, I've always wanted to open a dance studio. And, it completely out of left field, so to speak. You wouldn't have expected it, right? The unexpected passions and interests really start coming out in this stage. So it's a lot of fun.
Well, yeah. And I think it's really beautiful, because I've always loved to ask people, it's like, oh, what did you do on the weekend? Because most people would say, just the usual stuff, chores, whatever. But then someone will say, oh, I was trying to do hackathons, in the evening, where, you jump online and you try and break whatever it is. And you get a little prize money for it. And that's random as heck, right? And I'm like, oh, okay, I'm curious about that. So what did you do? How'd you get into it? And they're a bit shy, or they don't want to talk about it. But those are the things that, I guess would be coming out of this whole process, right? Is you're identifying the little things that maybe, isn't really spoken about because people put up all these, walls, or there's something that they keep to themselves, but being able to put them all up on paper and then see, oh, actually, yeah, I could do this, or, oh, I have enjoyed doing that, or, oh, I wanted to do this. It helps bring that clarity. I mean, this is all just, it's giving me a big clarity moment as well, because I like how it's all coming together. And what I do want to just reflect on quickly is how you said about, in the 9 to 5 is, I think that's right, is, this isn't to say that this is a way to escape the 9 to 5, but it's about helping you pursue that dream or whatever it is. And I think it's so true is a lot of the time, especially, I know it's a bit cliche, but we're generalizing that in the 9 to 5 space, that a lot of the time people are in there, they just want to get out of this rat race or go to where the grass is greener. And they look over at that other corporate job, or they look over there working for yourself that, oh, that's going to solve all my problems. This is going to be so much better. When really, if they had actually gone through that process of strengths, interests, that dreaming bigger, and then identifying, well, what are you actually wanting? Then, yeah, that whole perspective of what they're trying to achieve is maybe they just need to be doing that job, but in a different industry, or maybe they need to be, they need to be doing a completely different job in a completely different industry, but they've already got the skills to do it from the job they're doing, kind of thing. And I think that helps bring that clarity. So I want to make sure people understand that I'm not here to tell people that do this to escape a 9 to 5. That's not what we're saying. We're saying use this to help you, move forward to whatever it is, that passion, that goal, that dream, and put it into practice. Because, well, this is the first steps, right? Step 1 to 4 being clarity helps bring that fresh perspective for you then to take that executing, I guess, process, right?
Yeah, for sure. And going back to how I think that a lot of this stuff exists as a big continuum, so to speak, there's this ability to test things out or try things out. And so when it comes to, should I do this or should I do that? It's very easy. I'm very, very confident with lots of experience saying that you can do both. Now, you may not be able to do both full time, of course, and you may not want to do 10 things, but to be, let's say, a teacher full time, 9 to 5, having to prepare your lessons for the next day, what have you, and then launching a YouTube channel on how to create look and find books or something. It doesn't matter what it is. Streaming on Twitch, like Call of Duty, but still being a 9 to 5 person who delivers for Amazon. In today's day and age, with all the time management tools and the technology we have and all these things, it is always possible to do both. And that's true. As we start heading into the completion stage, that's where a lot of these conversations come up. Well, what is getting in the way? And just before we go too far from the clarity piece, with that respect, that 9 to 5 or the side hustle culture or escaping the rat races, I think when you start digging and having a conversation about like, well, what do you say you hate your job, you want to find your passion, and I have these 9 steps, so you hear that I can help you with them, and we start talking. And oftentimes, even after a lot of conversation, people can't really explain what they dislike about that existent job. And so that's an interesting red or green flag, depending on the way you want to look at it. But it often shows that maybe you don't hate it as much as you thought you did. You maybe dislike some of the communication you have with coworkers, or you just don't like the personal self-care schedule you have around that work, and all these sorts of different things. But anyhow, point being, just figuring out, well, what is the passion that you do love the most in the world? Because we are going to pursue it, even if you're keeping the 9 to 5, doing half of the 9 to 5, so that you can do a bit of both, or pursuing the passion full time.
Yeah, and no, it's really perfect, because it really means is by the end of that 4-step process, you should really have clarity of what you're about to execute, right? And I think that's so true, is a lot of the time we get so frustrated, we blame, whether it's a work, whether it's a process or other people, yet maybe it's ourselves, because, I've had to get up really early, doing this grind and getting there, I work late and all this, but you're putting all that pressure on yourself. Maybe it's, you just need to say, well, actually, I don't want to do this, I'm going to work from home, whatever it may be, and it fixes the problem. right? Because your passion is still in, whatever you're doing. It's just you're not happy with how you're doing it, right? So I think that's very, very important for people to understand, is that it's not about trying to, give you an answer that's going to, sorry, it is about giving you an answer, but it's actually about giving you clarity. It's not like going to be something that you go do all this and then you're going to be in a whole complete different place. But what it's going to actually do is just give you that fresh mindset of a whole different place. And that might actually be in exactly the same thing. So this is brilliant. This is so good. It's so good. All right. So you've gone through all that. You've got the clarity. You now understand where you want to be moving, in what direction, or maybe it's a couple of things that you want to kind of start to, move towards. So we get into this next phase, which is, I guess you've called it completion, which is, I guess, somewhat, making it happen, executing and moving forward. And the first one that I see is step 5 being, you need to decide on a budget, costs over pay. So let's dabble into that. So what are we talking about here? Well, there you go, guys. That is the end of part 1 of this 2-part episode. And what I love so much about Justin is he brings such clear and fresh perspective from so many different angles, and there's a lot of things here that we take in, and that's why we've actually broken it up into 2 episodes, is because, taking these steps and actually taking in all this information, it can be quite overwhelming. It can be quite daunting to think, okay, I have to do this, and what do I do here? But to take these first steps in this episode, to digest them, to spend some time, take some notes, and just kind of to just rethink some of the things that we've just discussed is going to enable you to come back and listen to part 2 of this next week, and maybe take that in a lot easier. So I really do hope you've taken something away from today's episode. Justin brings some fresh perspective. In the meantime, if you do want to reach out to Justin, go check him out at his Instagram at justtries. And you can see all the stuff that he's all about. He's doing so many cool things. Great guy. And I'm looking forward to part 2 already. So I really do appreciate you being here. It's been an absolute honor having this conversation with you. My name's Chris Furlong. I am your host, and you have a wonderful week. Now, if you didn't know, we do have the podcast merch, and this is with a key focus of enamel pins. Now, if you haven't checked these out, make sure you do, because the intent of these are really just to be a small token and a reminder for you to charge on, to push on, and to further your lifestyle. Whether it is a gift for someone else to encourage them, or maybe to inspire them, or maybe it's a way to motivate yourself, or you can simply just make a purchase to simply support the podcast, which would be greatly appreciated. We do also have some sweaters and some long tees, so make sure you check it out. Link in the description and in the show notes. Really do appreciate it. Cheers.